Welcome to the Classic Girls Coat, the pattern assembly and preparation. First of all, you need to join all your pattern pieces together. There is a dashed attachment line where you need to put them on top of each other. Each pattern piece has a different flower, so you can't get too confused. You might want to print off the scale to check that all pieces are true to size. Now cut out all your pattern pieces. Put all the pieces with the matching flowers into separate piles. That makes it a little bit easier. And it's actually a lot of stuff to cut out, but once you've done it and you've got your pattern together, it's going to be perfect. We begin by putting together our lining. So the front lining has two pieces, just A and B. So if you want to put those together. Now we're putting the back together. That has three pieces, A, B and C. We also got some lining pieces for the back. And then we've got the front. The upper front just goes together here, A and B, very easy. And then we've got the lower front, which has A, B, C and D. So first of all, you put the top together, A and B, then the lower end, C and D, and then put them together. You can also see here on the right, we've got the pocket. If you are doing my little bow pocket, then of course you can just fold that part over. Now the lower front is wider than the upper front to allow for gathers or pleats. You can see that here. The sleeve has three pieces, A, B and C. The back again has also three pieces, A, B and C. The iron-on interfacing for the front coat has three pieces, A, B and C. The tabs have two patterns, one for the iron-on interfacing and one for the contrast and shell fabric. The pattern for the interfacing has no seam allowance. This makes it so much easier to create a perfect curve whilst you're sewing. These are the patterns for the bias binding. The wide strip will bind the collar and the slim one is for the piping. Now cut the interfacing. For the front facing you need that twice, the collar once, cuffs twice and tabs twice. Cut the contrast fabric next. You need the collar, the centre back facing, tabs, pocket, bias, bows and centre bow. Fold over one corner of the fabric and cut in the fold. Make sure you have enough to cut all your pieces out, so you just place them on top, and once you sorted that, you take them off and you start cutting your piece. Then I just fold it over and over to reduce the length that I have to cut. Pin my bias pattern on, cut one long and wide for the collar. So you see that actually you don't need that whole length, you just need the width of it. But to make it easier for you, I've made a complete pattern. Cut 4 or 5 long strips for the piping, just so you have enough. It's very annoying if you don't have enough, so just give yourself plenty. Then join the bias strips to create one long strip. So they go together like that. So basically you're forming a corner, 90 degrees there. You also need a bias strip for the top edge of the bow pocket. Cut one. And then cut the strip in half because you don't need it to be very long. It just goes across your pocket. Now we can cut out all the rest of our pieces. So fold your contrast fabric over just so you can cut everything twice or on the fold and pin it. If you're doing the easy side pockets, place those on instead of the bow pockets, obviously. Try not to waste any fabric. You don't need to leave gaps. The seam allowance is included. It's 1 centimeter. We are cutting out the collar on the fold, the pockets, the center of the bow and the tabs, and the center back facing. You also need to mark your pocket, so that's where we're going to put a pleat or a gather. You need to mark the center of the collar and also the shoulder. You want to mark the center back here again of the facing. A quick look at the pattern pieces for the shell fabric. The lower back is wider than the upper part to allow for a really generous pleat or gathers. The same applies to the front. You can use gathers. I have used that in my video tutorial. You also have to cut the cuffs, pockets and tabs and the collar in the shell fabric. So now I'm going to cut my shell fabric. Make sure that you put all the pieces on as economically as you can. If you have a directional pattern, all pieces must lie in the same direction. Mine didn't, so I could place the pattern pieces where they fitted best. So also I'm using the bow pockets, so I folded over the side opening. We don't need that if we're making the bow pockets. So I've cut out all my pieces and I mark again centers. I also need to mark where I'm going to put my gathers on the lower front. That's very, very important, so make sure you do that. Mark your pocket, mark your pleats or gather, and on the cuffs you need to mark with 2 snips, one end of it. It's the slightly slimmer one which will be attached to the lining, so that way you can't get confused. Then you mark again the shoulder on your collar and the center of your collar. On the sleeve you have to mark the sleeve head, mark where the front of the sleeve is, and then you also mark your pleat at the lower end of the sleeve, which is attached to the cuff. And now finally we need to cut our lining, and that's the lower back once, the lower front twice, and the sleeves twice, upper back side twice, and upper front side twice. So it sounds a lot, but actually it's quite logical. So just watch what I'm doing and you can just copy it straight from this video and you'll be absolutely fine. And of course I needed the sleeve as well, and because I've got so many rests of this curtain lining that I always use for lining, that I've just put those on. If you put them all on together, of course, because you've got the fabric in one, then that would look slightly different. As with the shell, you need to mark the sleeve head, the front of the sleeve, and the pleat in the cuff area. Mark the pleat on the lower front and the back as well, of course. Finally, take the collar, tabs and cuffs plus the upper and lower front and iron on the interfacing. See how easy it will be to sew the curve around the back and the sleeve tabs. For the front, I simply cut my interfacing to fit. The front facing is now firmed up and I am ready to go. To view how to sew the classic girls coat, click here, and the pattern as ever is available from Etsy.com and the shop is called Sew Like a Pro.